हमारे साथ शक्ति शुगर के एग्जीक्यूटिव चेयरमैन मिस्टर मनिकम जुड़े हैं, उनसे बात करते हैं। मिस्टर मनिकम, मॉर्निंग टू यू, थैंक्स फॉर जॉइनिंग अस। नाउ फर्स्ट ऑफ ऑल, हाउ राइटली इज दिस फियर प्लेस्ड कि जो प्रोडक्शन है शुगर प्रोडक्शन डोमेस्टिक दैट कुड फॉल अप टू 18 to 20%? सर वी कांट हियर यू, विल ट्राई एंड रिकनेक्ट। लेकिन हाँ, ये ज़रूर है कि दो चीज़ें हैं यहाँ पर। एक, प्रोडक्शन गिरने की आशंका, और दूसरा उसके चलते जो इंपोर्ट ड्यूटी है उसको सरकार कम कर सकती है या फिर हटा सकती है टू सस्टेन द सप्लाई डोमेस्टिक मार्केट में। लेकिन यहाँ पर ट्रिगर्स और भी हैं। देखिए, जो चुनाव के नतीजे आएंगे ना, चुनाव में काफ़ी बार बातचीत हुई है गन्ना किसानों की और शुगर की,
15 दिन के अंदर भुगतान,
15 दिन के अंदर भुगतान की। तो ये सारी चीज़ें हैं जिस पर बाजार की नज़र रहेगी फिलहाल।
बिल्कुल, खैर इस चीज़ पे तो ध्यान रखना ही होगा। साथ ही साथ प्रोडक्शन के पॉइंट ऑफ व्यू से आज इस्मा के प्रोडक्शन के आंकड़े भी आ जाएंगे, शायद उसमें भी 18% कट आए। और एक और चीज़ ध्यान रखें क्योंकि ग्लोबली भी आप शुगर के प्राइजेस को ज़्यादा चेंज नहीं कर पाएंगे। इंपोर्ट ड्यूटी सरकार अगर कम कर भी दे तो शायद प्रोडक्शन के गैप को फिल नहीं कर पाएगी, क्योंकि वहाँ पर भी यहाँ से भी इंपोर्ट करना होगा, वहाँ पे खुद अपने आप में शुगर की प्रोडक्शन थोड़ी कम है। तो दबाव तो रहने वाला है, इसमें कोई दो राय नहीं है। तो शुगर पे आपको थोड़ा सा संभल कर ध्यान के साथ ट्रेड करने की ज़रूरत होगी। मेरी एक और इम्पॉर्टेंट चीज़ है, अगर शुगर के प्राइसिंग को देखना है, साइक्लिक भी है, तो लगातार चलते भी हैं। और ये न केवल इंडिया बल्कि ग्लोबली भी पैटर्न देखने को मिला हमें।
बिल्कुल। चलिए, इस बीच मिस्टर मनिकम है हमारे साथ। सर, सॉरी, देयर वाज सम ऑडियो इशू। या, सो माय बेसिक क्वेश्चन वाज हाउ राइटली इज दिस फियर प्लेस्ड ऑफ फॉल इन प्रोडक्शन, इन डोमेस्टिक प्रोडक्शन ऑफ sugar up to 18 to 20%?
Yeah, I think, see, last year we produced something like 250, and definitely we are looking at more than a 20% drop this year. We will be between 190 to 200 is what we are
More than 20% drop?
Yeah, more than 20% drop.
So do you expect import duty to be removed?
Hopefully, yes. We'll have to see what the government does, because we will be running tight. Next year also we expect, my personal view is that production may not pick up beyond 22, 23. So we will have to take a longer term view and take a call.
Sir, there is any impact of the import duty cut? If the government try to cut the import duty, do you believe there is impact on the prices of the sugar?
Not really, because even if they go to zero duty today, the import parity price is around 44 rupees. So I don't think even with zero duty the prices will come down today.
Also, last question to you, Mr. Manickam. The sugar space and especially the sugarcane farmers have featured a lot as far as election speeches are concerned in the UP. Now, what is your take? Because a lot of promises have been made, and BJP also made a promise that all the pending payments will be cleared in 15 days' time if they come to power. But what is the ground reality?
See, the ground reality is it's better that the politicians keep away from the sector, because as it stands, every time they make a promise and they make the sugar prices go down so badly. Last year we were selling at 20 rupees, and that's where the problem started. So government was happy when the prices go down, and the industry gets into trouble, and then they make all promises. So I don't really see any of the parties making sense. So we'll have to wait and watch.
राइट, ऑल राइट मनिकम, शुक्रिया हमारे साथ इस बातचीत में शामिल होने के लिए। थैंक्स अ लॉट फॉर जॉइनिंग अस। हमारे साथ अब एम्बिट कैपिटल के हेड ऑफ इक्विटी प्रमोद गब्बी जुड़े हैं, उनसे बात करते हैं। प्रमोद, मॉर्निंग टू यू, शुक्रिया इस बातचीत में शामिल होने के लिए। सो नाउ वी आर विद इन द टचिंग डिस्टेंस, 9000 इज मोर और लेस अ फॉर्मेलिटी फॉर मार्केट। द बिगर क्वेश्चन इज, इसी रेंज में इज देयर अ फर्म सपोर्ट फॉर इंडेक्स, एंड क्या इस लेवल्स पर इंडेक्स ने जो असेंबली इलेक्शंस हैं उसे किस तरह से फैक्टर इन किया हुआ है? हैव दे फैक्टर्ड अ वेरी ऑप्टिमिस्टिक सिनेरियो फॉर बीजेपी और अ मिक्स्ड बैग और अ हंग असेंबली इन यूपी?
Difficult to ascertain what the market is factoring, particularly events such as these, because as we've seen over the last year or so where flows have been strong, the market has chosen to take these sort of events or any sort of so-called perceived adverse outcome of either electoral results or otherwise in their stride and continue to move ahead. The reason being, at least in the short term, the markets are driven by flows, and the flows have continued to remain buoyant. Indeed, the domestic flows have held up. You have reasonable guaranteed inflow through SIPs and EPFOs, which give you that support. In addition, you've seen incremental buying. And also over the last month or so, the sort of outflows we saw from FIs through October, November seems to have been stemmed or reversed in some ways. So to that extent, if the condition of both external and internal flows into the market remain, I wouldn't expect too much of an adverse reaction if the result was not as expected by the market beyond a day or two, for example.
मिस्टर कभी एक और चीज़ है, जो जीएसटी है उसको लेकर गवर्नमेंट बहुत तेज़ी से आगे बढ़ रही है. एटलीस्ट अगर आप टेक्निकली देखेंगे ना, 1 अप्रैल से वो इम्प्लीमेंट होना चाहिए था, सिर्फ 2 ही महीने लेट है, क्योंकि गवर्नमेंट ने अब ऑलमोस्ट कंफर्म कर दिया कि 1 जुलाई को वो जीएसटी को इम्प्लीमेंट कर रहे हैं. आपको लगता है कि ये एक टर्न अराउंड हो सकता है? ठीक है, इलेक्शंस के बाद का जो स्विंग होगा सो होगा, लेकिन एक टर्निंग पॉइंट है इकोनॉमी के पॉइंट ऑफ व्यू से?
Yes, I mean, there's absolutely no doubt that the GST regime is perhaps one of the biggest reform measures by this government, or perhaps including the last government over several years that the country has seen. So there's absolutely no doubt in terms of its positive impact on the economy from a structural perspective. But right at the outset, I would think that there will be sort of speed bumps. We're also hearing from companies and distributors that there is some uncertainty in terms of buying ahead of the GST regime itself until the rates are clear. And even in a situation where rates are different and perhaps make it unviable to be sitting on expensive inventory ahead of the regime kicking in, you might see some sort of a slowdown in activity there. So people need to be prepared for that in terms of a short-term impact. But also in the early days of GST implementation, I'm sure there will be some teething problems in terms of implementation, which could cause some sort of a disruption in the short term. But looking beyond that, may the second half of this year, once things settle down, then we should see the positive effects come through for a long time.
Pramod, also now because we have to look at markets in a global perspective. 2-3 things. One is I think market is more than confident about the rate hike which is pending in US, and Fed is again and again hinting that. Second, China ने जिस तरह से indicate किया है that they might be actually at the lower spectrum of expectation as far as GDP growth is concerned. And third is the Indian growth prospects, keeping in mind कि जो Q3 GDP numbers थे, they were far better than expected despite demonetization. So putting all this together, क्या ये एक natural base या फिर एक natural सेफ्टी नेट क्रिएट कर रहा है इंडिया में मार्केट वैल्यूएशंस को लेकर, वेयर वी मे नॉट सी, इवन इफ मार्केट्स वर टू करेक्ट, वी मे सी अ लिमिटेड डाउन साइड?
Yeah, I mean, I think the global situation is far more clearer. US has recovered quite strongly. And there are already talks of, if not 3, potentially 4 rate hikes by the Fed this year. So that's the extent of buoyancy we are seeing there, which is good for the global economy in general. We'll have to wait and watch, what sort of protectionist measures actually the president undertakes. So we will watch that space. But by and large, US performing well is good for the rest of the world. China is grappling with its own problems. Now 6.5 is perhaps realization of those problems, but I don't think those problems will go away anytime soon. So to that extent, I think any sort of impact coming from Chinese consumption or rather Chinese continued investment into capital goods and so on, so that sort of expectations need to be curtailed. As far as India is concerned, our sense is Q3 perhaps didn't show the full effect of demonetization. You can expect some of that to come through in Q4, and more so some of the second round effects of formalization of the economy that was accelerated by demonetization and will continue to get impacted by GST will have its own second round negative impacts in the form of some of the small and medium enterprises becoming unviable, and as a result some sort of job losses coming through. So that will have its own impact on consumption. But in the broader perspective, I guess, given India is perhaps one of the few emerging markets which have a domestic market to talk about, investors continue to favor it more positively relative to other emerging markets who are dependent on a global recovery. So to that extent, we will be insulated and we will have our own sort of destiny in our control. So looking beyond the here and now in terms of impact of demonetization, GST, all the fundamental positives for the country remain, and that keeps foreign investors interested in the market.